Hi, I'm Kevin Lee with the E-Marketing Association. Most people know me also as the founder of Did It. We started as a search engine marketing firm with organic and paid search, but now we do a little bit of everything. We've made 11 acquisitions to become full service. I also run Giving Forward, which is a cause marketing based nonprofit. So I'm lucky enough to be joined by Matt Diiorio with MetLife, and wanted to chat a little bit with him about sort of how marketing has changed in the last year. Um, Obviously, financial services and insurance were very sort of agent centric for a lot of brands. And so my first question is that given that agents are less likely to be meeting prospects and customers in person, sort of how has that changed your job as a the marketer who tries to give the agents the leads and tries to sort of get the brand in front of the prospects?
Yeah, no, thanks for the question. And thanks again, Kevin, for having me. So I lead our global demand generation practice at MetLife, right? So at a whole, right, we're thinking about what are the best ways we think about generating leads, nurturing those leads, right? And working with sales for full conversion, right? And so to your point, obviously the last year plus has been quite an interesting shift, right? We have B2B and B2C models, which typically in the past have relied on that agent-led face-to-face selling, right? And so I think what it did for us over the last year was really have us take a step back and think about how do we pivot quickly to more digital selling, right? What is the best way to really engage our prospects and customers, quite frankly, in the ways that they want to be engaged, right? So this requires, quite frankly, a strong partnership between the sales organization, IT, marketing to find innovative ways to actually go ahead and do that. And so I think the sales process has changed, but changed for the good. And I think it's a good thing for consumers, right? Because I think it focuses us to be more precise in our targeting, more mindful in the content we serve, better at leveraging data and listening to our customers in terms of how they want to interact with our brand, right? So is that a chatbot? Is it WhatsApp? Is it WeChat? Is it an email? Is it social media, right? Like these are all the things now that we have to be thinking about. And in every country, it might be a little bit different. So I think what we've really done is worked with the sales force to understand what they need, as well as listen to our customers to understand how they want to be engaged when they're actually ready to buy. And I think it's opened us up to really think broader about what are the best digital channels and tactics to go ahead and do that. There's not a one size fits all model.
Right, right. What I like about your approach is that to some extent, it sounds like you're really empowering the customer to choose how they want to interact with the agent. And then you have to sort of either drag the agent kicking or screaming into the digital age, or like give them the training to make them comfortable in whichever channel of communication the customer wants.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Look, I mean, I think this evolution, obviously, to digital engagement has been coming for a while, and I think you've got some countries that are already much more advanced in that kind of digital selling platform technique, right? Others maybe a little bit behind, but I think to your point, right? It's that fine balance of thinking about the traditional approach to potentially those selling, but really, quite frankly, what does the customer need, right? Because if we're able to deliver through that digital experience for a customer, right, you're able to see, quite frankly, a pretty significant uptick, right, in conversions because of that, right? So
Right. So, the insurance and financial services are not the only category that have had to sort of rethink their marketing models, and you know, how should people in your role, regardless of what industry they're in, how should they think about the marketing mix and the media mix? I sort of think about media mix as paid, but then the marketing mix is broader because could include earned media, and sort of any tips on how they should sort of think through, how do I be where the customer is when they want me, or how do I get where the customer is if I think they'll need me soon?
yeah, yeah, absolutely right. And I think to your point again, we've learned quite a lot over the last year, and I think it's made not just us at MetLife, but I think a lot of marketers, right, really think about that end-to-end customer journey, and quite frankly, how do we better leverage data and technology, right, to get smarter about implementing the right mix of paid, owned, and earned, right? So when we think about what are the right levers that we need to pull across that journey, across paid, owned, and earned, right? And in many ways, it's just the importance of having the right data strategy, right? For us, it's really thinking about how do we better target people and how do we provide personalized experiences to consumers, right? Quite frankly, no matter what channel it is. And so I think when we think about it broadly, right, I think you'll probably see some shifts in people going back to potentially how they allocate their dollars. But for us, right, I think it's too soon to tell, right? It depends on so many factors, right? How many people continue to work from home? Has this changed consumer buying habits for good, right? Buying online. I'm not sure we know all of those things yet. And so when we think about the right mix, I think it's thinking about paid, own, and earn. But I think that the other kind of learning for us, quite frankly, was being more agile in this process, right? I think that was another big shift for us, which was obviously the pandemic happened, right? And it was okay, a quick pivot. So of course we need a plan, we need a forecast, but I think quite frankly, it's getting better at how do we have set up processes to test and learn. How are we able to pivot quickly? How do we get the organization right around this idea of being able to move fast, right? And so I think for us, as we think about the channel mix moving forward, right? To me, it's not a static thing. It's how, as an organization, can you think about iterating and testing and learning to optimize what your plan is over time across any and all channels.
Yeah, that's great. It's sort of funny because the sort of agile marketing was built into the Did It corporate culture mainly because of where we started, right? We started
Yeah.
in organic and then paid search, and paid search was really pre-programmatic. It was the first real-time auction for important visibility and important
Yeah.
clicks, and so we had to change on sometimes a hour by hour, minute by minute basis.
Yeah.
And so it was sort of, as we moved into other forms of media, it was just sort of natural for us to think like you tear up the media plan anytime you need to and start from
Exactly.
scratch.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
you know,
Yeah.
and not every one of our clients was comfortable that way. I mean, back when I worked in McCann Erickson in 92, 93, you know, by Thanksgiving, by you had the next year's media plan pretty much locked down,
Baked.
right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, that's almost the opposite of where we are now with agile, and
Yeah.
it's great to see that some larger marketers, which you would think, you know, would be more resistant to becoming agile, are starting to actually embrace it, because
Yeah.
it is in fact sort of a good practice to engage in.
Absolutely. And I think it also goes to, I think over time, as kind of the digital ecosystem has gotten even more advanced and there's more kind of tools, right? I think we've started to see across marketing, right, more SMEs, right? So you've got your search expert, you've got your paid media expert, you got your performance marketing, and I think what we've learned, and I think quite frankly, a lot of my colleagues across the globe have realized, like, you can't act independently, right? You might have specialists that are doing all of these jobs, but if you're not thinking about that entire ecosystem and how all of these things work together, how the people that own the website, right, and the SEO and the SEM and this and that, right, if we're not all thinking together, it's really not going to be the most optimal experience for our customers. So,
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one other thing that I think a place where sometimes senior level marketing teams make mistakes, but it could be happening at the junior level too, is, you know, you get so locked into your lower funnel KPIs that you sort of start to ignore the upper funnel in your media
exactly.
mix, right? And so then you're overly focused on harvesting demand and not as focused on creating it.
Yeah.
And obviously, harvesting demand is great, right? To the extent that somebody raises their hand in search and says, "Oh, I want what you have right away," you know,
Yeah.
being there at that point in time is perfect. But you know, the upper funnel stuff is where the awareness and branding metrics kick in. And
Yeah.
you know, some marketing teams are sort of so obsessed with the lower funnel KPIs they sort of forget. And so, what has helped your teams sort of find that balance between, you know,
Yeah.
lower funnel KPIs, but not forgetting about the upper funnel?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think one of the things we talk a lot about, right, as we think about, generating leads, right? So one of the things that we say, it's not so much the volume, but it's the value, right? So we'll look a lot at when we think about a pipeline, right? There's a lot of leads coming into the system. Great, right? That means you might be pulling in demand, but if they're not quality leads, right, at the end of the day, right, if the sales organization is saying, you're bringing me a lot of people, right? But none of these people are primed, right? None of these people are willing to invest or buy insurance or whatever it may be. You've got a problem. And so I think that's one of the things that we tend to think about a lot, right? Is not just the upper funnel, but the nurturing part of this, right? How do we make sure that leads are warm? How do we make sure that we're serving the right content to people? So at that moment that they're ready to buy, right, the sales organization can go ahead and speak to that prospect and hopefully develop a relationship and make a sale, right? So I think it's about the value, qualified people, partnering with the sales organization to make sure that we're nurturing people throughout that entire journey. To your point, not just focus on some of those lower funnel performance metrics, right? Because I think sometimes when you get too focused on those, I think you miss the kind of broader spectrum. And also, quite frankly, then you're not thinking about what the customer needs, right? You're thinking about optimizing for CPLs or CPAs versus what at the end of the day, what does that customer need from you? So,
Right, right. Yeah, I have a sneaky suspicion that nurturing will become even more important because many marketing teams are going to lose some of the targeting that they've gotten really used to, right? So with the
yes.
third-party cookies disappearing, not just within Safari but within Chrome as well, and IDFA rolling out almost as we speak, you've got a situation where some of the data points you might have had before they became a lead to make sure that they were a good lead may
Yeah.
disappear, right? And so you won't know as much about the quality of the lead within the first 5 seconds of getting it.
Yeah.
So you'll have to
Exactly.
rely on the nurturing and the filtering to make sure that the sales team gets the Glengarry leads, not
Yes.
the leads.
Yeah.
So, have you guys thought through sort of
Yeah.
how your systems may change as you lose some of the targeting resolution that within
Yeah.
media buying in particular, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Right. So I think the notion of a cookieless world probably scares all marketers, let's be honest. Right. And I think it's going to be a challenge for sure. But I think, if we look about it from a long-term perspective, I actually think there's a potential huge opportunity here, right? Yes, cookies have played an important role, right, in how we target and retarget, but quite frankly, they're also pretty unreliable, right? Like think about it, right? They're not connecting offline and online behaviors, right? So I think the other thing that we've been thinking about is as we think of moving away from cookies, like let's be honest, right? Privacy is a big issue right now, right, with consumers, right? And it's going to be moving forward, right? So what are brands doing with my information? How do you actually build trust, right, with the consumer to be able to use their information? And so a couple of things, that we've been starting to think about in that future is first kind of that consent driven model, right? How people are opting in to giving you that information. And to your point earlier, how do you then nurture those people? And then broader kind of that unified data approach, right? How do we think about potentially having those unified IDs, right? That we attach to people, right? That hopefully are able to kind of hit on all of those bits and pieces of who they are in both an offline and online manner, right? And so I think if we're able to do this right and we're able to build trust with people, right, I think at the end of the day it will allow us, quite frankly, to target more effectively. At the end of the day, if we know more about people and they're giving us their consent, right, think about it, we can then serve better recommendations on products and services to actually build a better relationship. And so I think, look, I think we're a long way towards nirvana here, right? But I think at the end of the day, it hopefully is a win-win at the end of the day, right? For marketers, right, that nirvana state of attribution, right, should hopefully get easier, right, over time if we do this the right way. And then for consumers, it's great, right, because we're actually serving them recommendations and personalized experiences that they actually care about, right? We've looked into this, and there's a lot of stats out there, and one of them that was interesting for me was I think more than 50% of consumers are happy to share their information in order to get that personalized experience, right? And so if you think about that, that's great. One, we get the information we need to customize a solution for them. But then on their end, right, they're not getting all of these ads for things that are totally unrelated to their life, right? And so hopefully we'll get to that win-win. And we're doing a lot right now to think about how we set ourselves up in the future for something like that. But agree, it's not going to be easy, and it's going to take a while for all marketers to solve, quite frankly.
Yeah, yeah. Another conversation I end up in occasionally is the idea of sort of who should own the content marketing roadmap, right? Because corporate communications sometimes wants it at the very macro level because they sort of want to own the storytelling, right, around the brand and around the services that the brand and the problems that the brand solves, and but sometimes that content is really important, not just for very, very top of funnel, but sort of moving down into the mid funnel, right? Because that content becomes useful for nurturing. You'll be using it as part of a drip campaign potentially. And so then the tug of war begins, like, okay, and it's from an SEO perspective, obviously content is key, right? So now you've got these various team members or subject matter experts, as well as potentially even departments and divisions that would work better if they could collaborate, right? But they may not have collaborated in the past. So any recommendations on sort of how to streamline that in order to make sure everybody gets more mileage out of the content plan, out of the editorial roadmap, out of anything that you're doing in the content side?
Yeah. So I mean, first I think you hit it on the head, right? Which was, I think a lot of this is about roles and responsibilities, right? So not even just at MetLife, right? But I think in even previous roles, it's making sure there's clear roles and responsibility in terms of who owns what pieces of that content roadmap, right? And that content strategy. And there's going to be some parts where you're going to be in tight collaboration on certain parts of content. And then there's going to be other things where it's comms responsibility or marketing's responsibility to truly own that piece. But I think what we've seen work really well is making sure that there is that kind of joint roadmap. There's alignment at a senior level in terms of who does what, right? And then it's clear for everybody what they need to do to activate against. So I think at MetLife, I think we have a pretty good working model for that. So it works really well in terms of how we communicate externally, but as well as internally as well.
Right. The this year is just like every other year for the last 10 years, and that there's new shiny objects coming out from nearly every provider, like whether it's a new ad format, new targeting methodology, et cetera.
Yeah.
And then you've got sort of up and comers, which are just new platforms that are the sort of the shiny object. And the challenge for marketers is to sort of not get distracted by the shiny objects, but also not miss an opportunity because something's gaining momentum. So are there any marketing channels or platforms that have you particularly excited for the upcoming year?
Yeah. So obviously our team is always trying to stay at the forefront of what is that new tactic, platform, et cetera, right? What is the next TikTok or Snap or whatever it may be? But I think for us, what we've spent a lot of time focusing on, and we'll even in the future, right, is as we think about third-party cookies disappearing, privacy being a concern, the importance of first-party data, I think things like CDPs, customer data platforms, right, I think are super relevant and important, right? Enabling the ability to kind of aggregate all of that data that you have, right, to be able to ultimately effectively communicate against that, right? How do you link all of those data sources together? I know that's a struggle for most companies, right? You've got first-party data. That first-party data sits in potentially 20 different places within your organization, right? Who owns the data? How can you get access to the data? Then you've got third-party data, right? And so I think the more that you can focus on that proper data strategy, right, and potentially use things like a CDP to kind of aggregate that all together, I think is great, because then you get to kind of that ultimate goal of what all marketers want, which is that single view of the customer, right? How do you ultimately get to that single view of the customer so you're able to better target, but again, also offer personalized and relevant experiences and communication for them, right? Because that's at the end of the day what we're trying to do, right? We want to make sure that if we're serving something to a potential customer or current customer, it's relevant, right? And the more that we can leverage our own data better and additional, data to complement that, I think the better it will be. So, we're all in on that world and thinking about how to best optimize data across all different streams right now.
It'll be fascinating to see how sort of the data haves versus the data have-nots fare,
Yeah.
both within companies of sort of equivalent size in the same category, but I think also between sort of the smaller companies to the larger companies. I think while larger companies may have a bit of a inertia to overcome, they also have the benefit of large data sets, right? Whereas
Yes.
a small company might be able to be more nimble, but they just don't have as deep a view of the customer. So it'll be interesting to
Exactly.
see how that tug of war.
It's that tension, right? It is. It's
Exactly.
the tension. Yeah. Yeah,
Because
you could be sitting on a ton of data, but if you don't know how to access it or activate against it, right, it doesn't really do anything for you.
right,
So,
right.
yeah, I totally agree.
And it's forced marketing and IT, what used to be called IT, to really have conversations that perhaps didn't used to be necessary. I mean, it's interesting because, when I started in SEO in 95, the website was owned by IT. It
IT,
wasn't
yeah.
owned by marketing. It was almost like marketing never even got any say into it,
Yeah.
practically. I mean, it was really very different. And then sort of marketing took it over, and now it's actually swinging back, right? Because of the requirements for CDPs and integrating into back end business intelligence platforms and really tying back LTV data about customers into marketing databases so that you can figure out who your best customers are. Now all of a sudden IT is like, hey, remember us? Like,
Yeah.
we're important again. Um, and so it's been fascinating to sort of watch it evolve, right? Where now those with data really have almost an unfair data that they're able to use, have almost an unfair advantage in the marketplace because they can cherry pick out the very best prospects right
I
before they
agree.
spend money against them.
I agree. And I think that partnership, right, between your IT organizations and your marketing organizations are more important than ever, right? Because I think, again, if it's a focus truly on what's the best for the customer, right? How do you get those organizations working together to share best practices, to share data, to work together on proper strategies to go ahead and execute against, right? So that's something that we're focused on as well. And I think, we try to always remind ourselves, like, if the customer is truly at the center of everything we're doing, it doesn't matter function, right? It doesn't matter role, right? Let's bring the best SMEs that we have to the table to help solve those problems and effectively communicate to our customers. So
Great, great. So any parting words as far as sort of marketing tips you think marketing teams should be thinking about?
yeah, I mean, I think it probably just continues on this data conversation, quite frankly, right? I think, we've been having a lot of conversations internally, and we always have external speakers come in to give us inspiration. And I think, the hot topics that come up time and time again are, personalization and how do we optimize this? And to your point earlier, how do we optimize lower funnel performance metrics, right? And I think there's all of these things that constantly come up. But I think the one through line between all of that, right, is data, right? Is the ability to access the data that you have. Can you activate against the data? Are you working? Is marketing and the business and IT working together, right, in a comprehensive way to leverage that data to the best of your ability to deliver for customers? So, not that data is a new shiny object. Obviously, this has been a hot topic for quite a while, but I'll be honest, right? I think it's still something most marketers and marketing organizations will say that they haven't solved yet, right? And so I think it's great to kind of think about, all the shiny objects and the new shiny tactics or tools or platforms that come out. But if we can't really solve that, I think at the end of the day, right, all of these things that you want to do as a marketer really aren't going to come to life. So,
Right, right. Great. Well, thanks so much. I appreciate you taking the time to brainstorm with me. It's always fun to hear what people are up to and how they've evolved their marketing plans, especially given what we just went through in the last year with the pandemic.
yes, thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.